Topic of the day today is coordinate geometry, and this is really going to focus on what we learned back in Unit 2. So our first question here is about Paula reading a novel for her English class. You can see on the right they've shown us a graph of the scenario here, and what it tells us is that the line represents the number of pages she has left to read after X hours of reading. The question is being asked of what is the rate of change for this graph. So some things to remember. Rate of change is another phrase for slope. So in this case, really what they're asking us is to find the slope of this line and probably also interpret what that really means in context. So if we look on the graph, we want to find two pretty points so we can count rise over run, or we can use those 2 points to use slope formula. And it looks like the line is crossing the y-axis at the 180 mark. And then it looks like right here would be another good pretty point. The reason that they chose this graph to show you this is because traditionally this means we'd be going down 1 over 2. So you would think that the slope would be negative 1 over 2. But that's wrong, because in going down 1, we're actually going down 20 because the graph is going up by 20s on the y-axis. And by going over 2, if you look on the x-axis, we're actually only traveling 1 hour. So the slope here is negative 20 over 1, which means that she has 20 less pages to read each hour she's reading. Okay, so since we're going down 20 over 1, again, we're trying to figure out the pages she has left to read. So the slope is negative 20, which would imply that obviously she's reading more pages, so she has less to have to read after each hour of reading. Question 2 is another interpret the slope. That's our final goal here. We want to interpret the meaning of the slope, but this time they gave us a linear model as an equation, and it's actually in y equals mx plus b form. So we know that in that format, the slope here is 12. What we need to figure out from reading this is what exactly that 12 represents. So it says the relationship is between the number of photos sold and the amount of money in dollars that he's earned. So it would be $12 per photo. And then our last question about, again, going back to rate of change in this case, is this time they're giving us a table. So we saw a graph, we saw an equation, now they're going to ask us to produce the rate of change and talk about it from a table. So what I would do with this one is use 2 ordered pairs and just calculate slope using the formula. So perhaps you just use the first 2 there. They give you 3. You can pick whichever 2 you want. But I want to do y2 minus y1. So maybe I'll do 33 minus 31 over, in that order, I have to do 1 minus 2. So that gets me a slope of 2 over negative 1, or a negative 2 slope. And if we read through the scenario again, it says she's feeding the ducks on the pond. And if she's going through her loaf of bread at a constant rate, how many slices of bread are remaining in relation to the number of minutes she's been feeding the ducks? So what we could say here is every minute she has used 2 slices of bread. Essentially, each minute she has 2 less pieces in the bag to continue feeding the ducks. Then on the back, we're no longer finding the slope. They're actually giving that to us in this first question. Now our goal is to write an equation. So you got to pay attention here to the context. This first one says find the slope-intercept form of the equation of the line. So we want to make sure we're writing in y equals mx plus b, which is on your formula sheet. If they specify, or if the question's multiple choice, sometimes they'll ask you to go to standard form, or they might write 4 equations in a random format and have you figure out which one matches. But in this case, we just have to go to y equals mx plus b. So They're giving us an ordered pair, so I'm going to call that x1, y1, and they're giving us the m, which is 3, the slope. So what I'm going to do is go straight to y minus y1, our point slope form, equals m times the quantity x minus x1. And then I can literally plug in those 3 values into that equation and solve for y. So y minus y1 here is negative 5. Our slope is 3, and x minus x1 here is 2. We can add the opposite on this side, so we have y plus 5 equals, we'll distribute and get 3x minus 6, and then lastly we just have to subtract the 5 over, so we'll have 3x minus 11. So y equals 3x minus 11 is the slope-intercept form for that information given. Question 5 is again asking us to write an equation. It doesn't specify a format here, so technically you could go to whatever form you want, but the difference here is that they're giving us 2 ordered pairs, so perhaps you start by labeling them x1, y1, x2, y2. And this time, since they didn't give us the slope, we have to find that first. So just like we did on the front with the table, we'll find the slope using the formula. y2 minus y1 on the top, then we want x2 minus x1 on the bottom. The nice thing here is that all those subtraction and negative signs change to plus. So we're going to have 21 over 9, which we can reduce to 7/3. From here, you're going to pick whichever ordered pair you want and use the slope and repeat what we did in question 4. So we're going to replace y1, m, and x1 in that point slope form. So in this case, I'll just use the ordered pair here that we started with as x1, y1. So the y value there is negative 2. Our slope is 7/3. And we're doing x minus x1 rather is negative 3. And again, we can change all those to addition. So y plus 2, we got to distribute the 7/3. In this case, the nice thing about the fraction here is it actually cross cancels with that 3, so we're left with a 7, and then simply we just need to subtract the 2. And then at this point, if they had asked to go to a different format, which they didn't, you could do like we did in Unit 2 and change this to standard form by subtracting the x term over, and then if they wanted true standard form, you'd have to get rid of the fraction by multiplying everything by 3. Or you would just need to match the final answer that you have with one of the, if it's multiple choice, one of the answer choices on the test. And then our last question is dealing with finding an x-intercept. Typically, we are more asked to find the slope and the y-intercept when it's in slope-intercept form. So this is a little bit different because they want the x-intercept. The thing to remember is that an x-intercept is always the ordered pair x, 0. So that means that the y is automatically 0 in this equation if I'm solving for the x-intercept. The other thing to keep in mind is that in solving this, I need to move something to the left-hand side. I can't solve it by trying to multiply by 3 or divide by 2 to get x by itself first. I need to move something to the other side. So I'm going to subtract the 7 over. So we'll have negative 7 equals 2/3 x. And then you can do this probably in one step in your calculator as long as you input it correctly, or you can break it down kind of piece by piece. So I'll start by multiplying both sides by 3. So we get negative 21 equals 2x. Since the 3's over here will cancel. And then if I divide by 2, I'll get negative 10.5. So the x-intercept here is negative 10.5, 0, or your calculator will tell you that that's the same as negative 21 over 2 divided by 0. So however they want you to present your answer, either one would be correct.